The variety of shearing equipment currently available on the market seems to be limited only by the imagination. Standard traditional shearing equipment includes knives and two-handled hedge clippers. Many growers work with a knife. Because a knife should be kept razor sharp for clean cutting on the trees, it's important to wear protective leg guards and gloves. An additional safety factor is to either hold a knife sharpener or dowel in the hand not holding the knife, or to keep the other hand behind you as you work. In the hands of a skilled shearer, knife shearing is a very fast process. Two-handled hedge clippers are much slower because you have to make so many more individual cuts. Shearing with clippers may also result in a looser shearing on larger trees, but they are particularly useful while the trees are still less than waist high. There are a variety of mechanical shearing devices, both gasoline engine or electric battery powered. Some are variants on an electric hedge clipper. Others are like a rotary blade weed trimmer. Most of these are either carried on the back or wheeled on the ground by the operator. All these machines are effective and fast, but are more costly than knives or two-handled hedge clippers. Since their speed offsets labor costs, they're worth investigating, especially if you have a plantation larger than 10 acres. Under normal conditions, some trees may need pruning from the time they are set into the ground until they are harvested. Pruning is the fine-tuned cutting of the top of the tree, including the single vertical main stem or leader of the tree, and the top whorl of branches. For this operation, a pair of hand pruners of either the anvil or scissor type is most commonly used. While walking through your plantation, you should easily spot seedlings or young trees that have 2 or more leaders, excessively thick branches on the top whorl, or unbalanced growth on different sides of the tree. Clip them out or correct them as you walk along. When you are completely removing branches, you can cut them at any time of the year. When you're trying to train the leader or a side branch, pruning should be done only when the trees are biologically ready to replace any cut end with new buds. If the original leader is missing, or one of 2 or more needs to be selected to become dominant, you should train the leader into a straight position. You can use either plastic twist ties, cotton string, a taping machine, or tree training metal clips that can later be removed. 2 side branches or 2 leaders can be tied together until one takes dominance. The second one should then be removed at its base. If there is nothing to which the new leader can be attached, use a dowel or a stick as a splint. Shearing, in contrast to pruning, is the shaping of the sides of the tree. According to most Christmas tree marketing people, the most desirable shape for a Christmas tree is like an inverted ice cream cone. The way to achieve this is to train the tree to that shape as it grows, controlling unwanted growth by cutting it off on an annual basis. Start when the trees are either 3 years in the ground or when they reach approximately 24 inches in height. Find out what your local market prefers and shear accordingly. Some people like short, squat trees. Others like tall, slender trees. The amount of shearing and the angle at which you shear will be quite different for these 2 types. The 4 primary species of trees being grown for Christmas tree markets in Kentucky are currently Scots pine, white pine, Virginia pine, and Douglas fir. Pruning and shearing vary somewhat among the 4 major species. The Scots pine is a 2-needled pine variety with sturdy branches and needles. It's not native to the United States, but has been grown here for a long time and is considered naturalized. It varies in needle length and color, as well as in diameter growth versus height growth. Under normal conditions, it will have only 1 growth period per year. It usually begins and ends growth a little ahead of white pine. Note this change in growth rate and biological readiness when you're planning your shearing cycle. You may have to make 2 passes to get the 2 species at their respectively optimal times. The white pine is the only 5-needled pine native to the eastern United States. It has soft, feathery foliage and often a naturally blue-green color. It's a native species in the whole eastern part of the U.S. It's somewhat more tolerant of damp sites than is the Scots pine. It, like Scots pine, normally has only 1 growth flush per year, but can produce the late llama's growth if there's a particularly damp summer. With natural healthy growth, it has a very open, spacious growth habit. so it may require a slightly heavier shearing than what would have been used for Scots pine to keep the foliage suitably dense for a Christmas tree. The Virginia pine is a 2 or 3 needled pine. The weight of its branches and needles are intermediate between white and Scots pine. Needles are often twisted and vary in color from tree to tree. It grows very rapidly and will continue to grow, in contrast with other pines, as long as light, temperature, and moisture conditions permit. It requires more pruning and shearing than the other species because of its steady growth. This does mean, however, that it will produce a marketable size tree in a shorter period of time, 4 or 5 years versus 6 or 7 for other pines. So there is a cost-benefit trade-off. Virginia pine is often planted for soil erosion control, so it is adapted to poorer sites in general than are the other 2 pine species. It may require either fertilizer or colorant to make the foliage a bluer green for Christmas sales. Virginia pine also produces cones at a very early age, so you may get some of your trees with decorations already on them. The Douglas fir is not a true fir. It differs from all the pines in several ways. It sets buds all along its branches, rather than only at the tips, so it can be pruned and sheared at times other than the growing season. It has a natural conical shape and may require only minimal shearing. This species is native to the west coast of the United States, so Kentuckians must be careful to get varieties from more southwestern mountain regions. Douglas fir grows more slowly than the pines and will probably require at least 8 years to produce a 6-foot marketable tree. Douglas fir can only be obtained through commercial nurseries and should be purchased as 3- or 4-year-old transplants, which adds to their expense. Once annual growth is completed, the new material hardens and becomes woody. The time to shear is when the branches and needles are fully elongated but not hardened off. One rule of thumb is that the new needles should have elongated to a length at least half that of the old needles. In Kentucky, this usually occurs between mid-May and mid-June, but unusual weather conditions can shift that period to be either earlier or later. Virginia pine will always need shearing first because of its rapid growth. If you shear too early, the branches will set, bud, and regrow because they have not yet completed their growth. This gives the branch ends a tufted appearance and will not provide a proper bud set for the next year's growth. If you shear the trees after they've already hardened off, you'll splinter the ends of the branches, and few, if any, buds will be set for the following year's growth. On all the pines, the leader is cut to a predetermined length of your choice. This length is determined mainly by what taper or side angle you want your trees to have. What you will find is that trees, like people, are individuals, and a predetermined length may not be appropriate for all the trees. If you have decided on a taper of 66%, however, you can make a judgment about how that taper line will look on each tree. The greater the length of the leader, the more open the tree will appear, and the wider the spacing between the whorls of branches. Shorter leaders mean denser and sometimes squatter trees. White pine benefits from fairly tight shearing because its foliage is so soft and pliant. Virginia pine also benefits from tight shearing because it grows so rapidly. Scots pine has sturdy needles and branches and may be more marketable if sheared more openly or loosely. The leader on pine should be cut at a 45-degree angle so that one of the new buds forming at the tip will clearly dominate the others and grow vertically. From its base on the first whorl of branches, it can be cut to a height between 8 and 12 inches. The first whorl should ideally contain an odd number of branches and probably should have no more than 9. More branches than that make the top whorl too dense. These branches should be cut to a length between 2/3 and 3/4 of a length of the leader. When you're pruning the leader and top whorl, take any corrective actions that appear to be necessary. If there are too many branches in the top whorl, balance the number on all sides and remove the extras at their bases. The same is true for extra leaders. On Douglas fir, you make the same kind of decision of leader length, but the cut is straight or horizontal and should be made about 1/2 inch above an existing bud. Proportional cuts on the first whorl of branches would be similar to those on pines. The cut should be made close to existing buds. Shearing the sides of the trees is much like what they'd say about sculpture. Visualize the smooth angled line you want to see on each side of the tree and cut away everything that doesn't belong. With a knife, the cut is usually a straight slice, using the whole arm from top to base of the tree. With hedge clippers, you may wish to turn them so that the bend in the clippers is toward you rather than away from you, and again clip off the ends that protrude from a visualized smooth line. With small trees, you can stand over them and see them more three-dimensionally than you can the larger trees. Various machines operate basically in the same manner as knives or hedge clippers and are used accordingly. Remember, the ideal Christmas tree for you to grow is a cone with a clear central leader, even foliage, no gaping holes, and roughly a taper of 60 to 70%, and a density and fullness that your customers will desire.